which I think we reviewed. I'm almost positive we did way back when we were still not super great at this podcasting thing. So
some would argue that we're still not super great. Welcome to another episode of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. My name's Tyler Hunt, alongside my co-host, as always, Pat Kuhn. How's it going, dude?
Tired. It's been a long week.
Got some heavy eyes going on.
I know. It's been super busy lately. But I did finally kind of dip my toes into Twitch. You've kind of done it all. I mean, we don't really take it all that seriously, to be honest with you. It's just something else that we do. But I finally kind of dipped my toes into it on Wednesday, and it was a lot of fun. I played For Honor for the first time.
Yeah.
I don't know if I really liked that game that much.
I watched a little bit of your Twitch stream after it was over. Like, it saves your broadcast, and I think you actually put it on YouTube.
Yeah, I did.
As well. Call me whenever you're done with the story, because I'm not a fan of the story.
Yeah, it's not great. I don't know if I'm even gonna I'm gonna play it again this coming week. That's probably what I'll end up streaming this coming week. But yeah, I didn't like it. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of the hack and slash games, and maybe it's just because I just played Rise, Son of Rome, which is almost identical to that game as far as the gameplay is concerned. I mean, For Honor has a little bit different mechanics to it, obviously, but it has a lot of just the hack and slash kind of mechanics to it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of those types of games to begin with, and I just beat one not too long ago, a couple of months ago, so it feels like I just played this game.
Yeah, I obviously talked about it a time or two in what we're into, and for me, the mechanics are what I really dug about it, but I don't like the interface. I didn't do much with the story because I didn't like the story, and then the online, they started having online issues a month or two ago, and I'm sure it's fixed by now, but that kind of sealed the deal for me. So I'd like to see what they could do with those mechanics and that gameplay, but I doubt I'll play it again, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll give it one more shot. Like, I didn't stream for very long because I was actually kind of busy that night. So I said I was going to do it. So I sat down and I started. Kind of wish I had played the tutorial first before I started streaming, because I don't think that was very interesting. But I kind of like, with some of my Let's Play videos too, it's like I don't want to play too much of the game, because then if I have to go back and replay it, I just don't think that's genuine. So I wanted it to be like the first time I had played the game. Yeah. And so unfortunately that included the tutorial, which was kind of a bummer. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not digging the story so far. Don't really like the mechanics, like I said, but I'll give it like maybe one or two more shots. I also rented For Honor from Gamefly, and I also rented Sniper Elite 4, and I want that game kind of looks fun, but it's not something that I'm going to get too much into it. So I just kind of wanted something that was fun. And so if For Honor doesn't kind of catch my attention the next couple of times I play it, then I'll probably just switch to Sniper Elite. But I'm kind of see where the Twitch stuff goes, because I think for the most part it's just going to be me playing games that I kind of missed when they came out.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of me kind of just messing around doing that. So I don't know exactly what I want to do with the Twitch stuff just yet, but I liked it so far. I mean, there's a couple of things I would change, but I do plan on exporting it to YouTube. Like, I'll do it Wednesday night, actually do the stream Wednesday night, and then export it on Thursday night sometime. Cool. So
yeah, with For Honor, I suggest at least checking out the multiplayer before you send it back. It's very gratifying when you kill somebody in multiplayer. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. It really is.
All right, cool, man. So if this is your first episode, thank you for checking us out. We like to start each episode by kind of just checking in with each other. Tyler and I, when we first became friends, we had these nerdy conversations a lot, but we got our big boy jobs, and now we can't really have them as much as we'd like to. So we'd like to kind of just check in with each other. We call it what we're into. So what are you into this week?
So 2 movies came out last weekend, and we didn't review either because you refused to see the tentpole one,
yes,
which is Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales.
And the fact that you could barely remember the title leads me to believe that you did not enjoy it.
Yeah, because, well, I mean, there's Dead Man's Chest, and this is... I said it right? Dead Men Tell No Tales, is it?
I honestly don't care.
Yeah, so it's probably a good thing that we didn't go see this and review it, because this movie is a fucking disaster, as you called it. So you can definitely say I told you so. Not that I had too much stock going into it as it is, but I'm starting to feel like I am the abused person in a relationship, and I keep going back to the abuser at this point. For whatever reason, I mean, I didn't go into it thinking it was going to be great, but I had higher hopes than 3 and 4. And I wouldn't say that it's the worst of all 5, but it's very clear they're not trying much anymore at this point.
Yeah.
At this point, they're kind of, it's like, it reminds me of a bad Indiana Jones movie that takes place in the Pirates of the Caribbean universe, because it seems like they always have to have a MacGuffin
there was
now.
Aliens?
No, not quite. But they always have to have something like this item that they're after. And in this item, in this movie, it's Poseidon's trident. I guess legend has it that if you destroy Poseidon's trident, it breaks all of the curses of the sea. So this movie introduces Henry Turner, who of course is Orlando Bloom's character's son, and he wants to find this trident so he can break the curse, and Orlando Bloom can stop being the Flying Dutchman's captain, and he can come back home. And then it also introduces another character named Karina. She wants it because of some bullshit with her dad she didn't know. I don't really remember too much. It was kind of not my cup of tea. And then Jack Sparrow wants it because if he's being followed and hunted down by Javier Bardem, who you see in the trailer, who is a ghost man. So if he breaks that curse, then maybe when he turns back to a human, he won't want to kill Jack Sparrow. So that's kind of what the movie's about. That's what brings these 3 characters together. And it's just a bunch of bullshit. So I remember when Jack Sparrow was a clever character, and Johnny Depp was nominated for an Oscar, for Christ's sake, for his portrayal. And now it's basically, to me, like he's just doing the motions. And it was very apparent in this movie. I remember hearing a report that came out from like his former assistant or former manager or somebody that obviously he cut ties with, and there was some bad blood saying that he wears an earpiece and they feed him his lines so he doesn't have to memorize it. And I don't know what the truth in that is. Who knows? But I definitely could... I don't know. It definitely just seems like he's doing the motions at this point. You could say, hey, say this, and he could Jack Sparrow it up at this point.
Yeah,
5 movies in, he can't be trying that hard. That being said, I also watched an interview he did with Ellen a couple weeks ago, and he's like very famous for not watching his movies, watching his performances. He doesn't like to see himself on screen, and he said he watched this one and suffered through it, which he probably really did, because he wanted to ensure they were still making quality movies. And whenever she pressed him about what he thought of it, I don't know if he's a very awkward person in these interviews, so I don't know if it was just that, but it seems like he didn't like the fucking movie.
Yeah.
And she kind of saved the segment, but I don't know that he's completely bought into it. Like I mentioned, Javier Bardem, of course, plays the villain, and the whole idea behind this character isn't necessarily bad, but it's almost like, what haven't we done yet? So in the first movie, we did like zombies. In the second and third movie, we did fish people, and we did mermaids and shit. In the fourth movie, we haven't done ghosts yet, so they had to do the ghost things, and it just didn't really work for me, but he definitely tried his hardest. The other person I want to bitch about really quick is the actor who played Henry Turner. I don't know what he's been in. His name's Brenton Thwaites. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Probably
there's
not.
No way.
Thwaites, but he's god awful.
You're just gonna double down on it?
Yeah, we're just going with that at this point. But he is awful. It's like watching a cardboard cutout act. The only bright spot would be the actress who played Karina. I don't know her name off the top of my head, but she was a bright spot. She was charismatic, and I'm sure she'll go on to bigger and better things. But at this point, I don't think that it necessarily flopped at the box office, but I don't think it did what Pirates movies typically do. So I'll be curious to see where they take it from here. The main story, like for the franchise, wraps up really nicely at the end of it. But then, of course, there's a post-credit scene, and it's fucking lame. It doesn't make any fucking sense and sets up for future installments. So we'll see what Disney decides to do. But I don't know, man. It's time to pull the plug, I think.
Yeah, I mean, these movies are garbage. I mean, really, honestly, the first one, and it may have just been a case of, I think I want to say that I went to see a different movie and it was sold out, and I just happened, like, okay, we'll go see this one. And I don't even remember who I saw it with, but we were both kind of blown away by how just fun it was and how good it was. And so I kind of got attached to that franchise, and I watched the second one, and I was like, it's not as good, but I mean, it's still decent. And it just completely fell off a cliff from there. And I haven't watched the first one in a really long time, so I don't even know if it was just because my expectations were almost non-existent when I went and saw it, because I wasn't even expecting to see it when I went and saw it. So I don't know. I've obviously given up on the franchise. I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm all the time we talk about it, I'm a Disney nerd, and I love the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. And of course, they've redone it at both parks now, and it features Captain Jack pretty heavily. But at its core, that ride is about, swashbuckling and just debauchery. And that aspect of the movie is kind of gone at this point. It's more, I don't know when everything became so mythical, but it'd be a lot cooler to see a more grounded Pirates of the Caribbean movie whenever they eventually reboot it or whatever. But I think that there's a cool Pirates movie to tell, but they're just off the deep end at this point with the mythological stuff.
For sure.
So what are you into, man?
Well, you mentioned there was 2 movies that came out last week. You saw Pirates 5. I went and saw the other one, Baywatch, which I actually mentioned on the last episode, that my wife and I had free passes to the movies, and she kind of wanted to see this one. So I was like, okay, well, we'll go see it. Honestly, it wasn't even on my radar. It reminded me, at least the promotional material reminded me a lot of 21 Jump Street, just kind of had that same feel with it. I mean, both of those shows, of the original shows, were, from what I understand, I didn't watch a single episode of either one of them, but from what I understand, are dramas and a little bit before my time. And 21 Jump Street had obvious successful kind of rebooting that as a comedy, and it was really, really successful, and I really, really like those movies. Not so much the second one as much as the first one, but the first one's really, really funny. So I thought, well, what the hell, we'll go see this one. Maybe I'll get that same enjoyment out of it. It's directed by Seth Gordon, who did Horrible Bosses, but he also did King of Kong, which is one of my favorite documentaries of all time. I had actually forgotten that it was him that did that. So at least they had some kind of talent around it. It stars Dwayne Johnson as the leader of an elite squad of lifeguards who try to bust a drug ring on their beach. So I had almost no expectations going into this movie. Wasn't on my radar, like I said. I was just kind of hoping that it had some of that 21 Jump Street magic in it. It was 19% on Rotten Tomatoes the last time I looked when I was prepping for the episode. And I actually think that's kind of crazy, because now that I've seen it, it's not 19% awful. Okay. Like, it's not, when you see that number, you think, okay, this is like one of the worst movies this year. Like, that is really, really bad. You have to be a special kind of bad. Like, Batman v Superman wasn't 19%. Like, you have to be just awful. And it's not that bad. It's not good. I laughed, I would say probably out loud laughed maybe 6 times during this movie, which is for an hour and I think it was like an hour and 40 minutes or something like that, maybe an hour and 50. It's not bad, but the joke density is ridiculous. Like, I laughed 6 times, and I probably laughed 1 out of 30 jokes. Like, it's just like Deadpool kind of like just machine gun comedy, and it's really bad. Some of the jokes are not funny, and then they are obsessed with like doing callbacks on the original bit, but callbacks are only funny if the original bit is funny. And it was most of them were not funny, and it was not good. Let's just say, and the third act gets to the point where it's not even funny anymore. Like, they're not even trying to be funny, and the story gets so ridiculous, and there's so many plot holes that third act is just almost unredeemable bad. It makes no sense. They try to kind of make fun of the fact that it was like they shouldn't be doing this because they're just lifeguards, but at a certain point it was just like, yeah, you shouldn't be, because this is still like, you're not trained for this. This is not your job. Like I said, it's only like an hour and 15 minutes long, but that third act made it seem like it was like 3 hours long. Like, it was really tough. And once they kind of got past the comedy, which the comedy wasn't even that good most places, once they got past that, it was really excruciating to watch that third act. But definitely not recommending it. We kind of always put that standard where if we're going to recommend it, it's going to be 3 stars. If I had to give this a star rating, I would have to say like 2, and that's a real soft 2. So I definitely wouldn't recommend it. But if it's one of those things where you're doing something else and you just want something in the background, just something that you don't have to pay attention to, maybe on Netflix, something like that down the road, I wouldn't not recommend it. But yeah, it's pretty stupid, and the third act is really tough to watch.
Yeah, this is like the first slight against The Rock, I guess. I think that there was some backlash against it, and he kind of got defensive on Twitter or something, but it's his first movie that wasn't a huge blockbuster that I can remember in the last few years, so bummer for him.
Yeah, I mean, they were charismatic.
Yeah.
The Dwayne, The Rock Johnson, and then Zac Efron. I thought they did a pretty good job. The material just wasn't very good, which was surprising. I know he didn't write it, but I'm a big fan of Thomas Lennon, and he actually did the story for this. Now, who knows what that is, like what that entails. You get a story credit. That doesn't necessarily mean you had much creative input into the final script or anything like that. So he didn't get writing credit. He just got story credit. So
I might be wrong, but I thought him and his writing partner, who I forget his name, but they were on Reno 911 together, were developing this movie first for a long time, and then I think it maybe became what it is now. So maybe that's why he got story credit.
Yeah, maybe.
But I'm sure like the studio was just like, all right, imagine 21 Jump Street, but the Baywatch version. And
for sure. And they tried really hard to be that movie, and it just didn't work because the humor wasn't funny. Like, I mean, comedy's subjective, and you might go into this movie, one of our listeners might be listening right now, and they're like, I love Baywatch. That's cool, man. Like, there was some moments that I thought were actually really funny. It just felt like when I'm only laughing 1 out of 30 jokes, it's just like it overemphasizes how not funny it is. Like when you keep calling back to the jokes that didn't work to begin with, it just comes off as just desperate.
Oh, for sure. I could definitely see that. That being said, I'll probably watch this movie at some point.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's an easy watch. The first 2 acts are an easy watch because it's nothing serious is going on, and they're cracking a lot of jokes. So, and again, a comedy is very subjective. So, other people might like this a little bit more than I did, but that third act is really, really, really bad.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
All right, so our next segment is just plainly called Comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comic books each week, and we like to spotlight 1 or 2. So what'd you read this week?
I read the first Titans annual that came out. It's been out a few weeks now, but I just got around to it in my stack of comics. And annuals we've talked about on the podcast before. We talk about them time to time. They're typically one of 2 things. It's like a few mini stories within the comic, or a story that typically is in continuity but is separate from the ongoing series. And this story falls into the latter. It centers on Wally West, the Flash, Dick Grayson as Nightwing, Batman, Donna Troy, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Garth. So if you didn't keep track there, basically 4 of the Titans and their mentors being kidnapped and placed in basically some kind of fortress by a villain called the Key, who is apparently an older Justice League villain that hasn't been around in a couple of years that I don't know much about. But for what it's worth, this guy is basically pitting them against each other. It's apparent that he's working for someone, but you don't really see who he's working for in the comic. But he's pitting them against each other to basically break them down, mentor-apprentice style. So it's a pretty generic storyline in that regard, and the Key seems to be a very generic villain, but it did result in some really cool character moments. Especially between, I was expecting, I mean, of course, being us, I was expecting to really like the Nightwing, Batman stuff, which was pretty cool, but the stuff between Wonder Woman and Donna Troy is really great. So I wasn't familiar with Donna Troy too much, but apparently she was created back in the 60s, and she's been through a lot of reboots with her origin story, and this one kind of settles it once and for all, or at least for now. And I won't spoil it, but it results in some cool stuff between those two characters for sure. There's also some awesome beats between The Flash and Wally West. They bring the funny, as they typically do, and they're kind of mimicking Aquaman and Garth's relationship. I guess I think Garth used to be Aqualad, but now he's grown up and he goes by Garth, which isn't much better. So, and you know, he calls Aquaman like he's like Your Highness and stuff, and Wally West.
Aquaman sucks.
Yeah. So Wally West and Flash have fun with that, which is really funny. Titans has had a really solid run since it's been in circulation. I think it's like 12 or 13 issues now. But over its course, it hasn't done a lot with the mentor-apprentice relationships, which is surprising to me because the show Young Justice was so popular and it's coming back, and that show centered a lot on the strain between the sidekicks and the superheroes. And it was cool to see them kind of visit that in this annual, and I think they did it really successfully. It's one of the more solid annuals I've read lately, actually. So the plot to get the characters together and kind of try to figure the way out of this was a little weak, but in the end it resulted in some cool character beats that I really liked.
Cool, man. I mean, I don't read this. I had very little desire to read it. I'm not a big Teen Titans fan.
I never got into the Teen Titans too much. I did like Young Justice. What's brought me to this comic, and was why I'm reading this comic instead of the Teen Titans comic, is that it's the Teen Titans, but they're adults now.
Yeah.
You know, Robin's gone on to become Nightwing and so on and so forth. So there's a different dynamic between the group, and I am digging that quite a bit. So
cool.
What'd you read?
I read Secret Empire #3. So this is the big event in the Marvel comic universe right now. We're actually kind of closing in on the halfway mark of this event series. It's currently set for an 8-issue arc, but we know how that's been going recently. They've been kind of making it a habit, both DC and Marvel, of tacking on that extra issue or two at the end. So we'll see how that goes. But I talked about the 0 issue and #1, and I talked about how I enjoyed them very much, very action-packed. I was very surprised with the 0 issue, especially it being so action-packed, because most 0 issues are kind of like annuals in a way. I kind of think of them as additional reading. Like, there's not a whole lot that happens in 0 issues, and so I was really surprised at how action-packed this 0 issue was. Issue 2 kind of took a step back in the action category, and it was a little bit more exposition heavy, which is fine. I mean, it wasn't bad. I appreciated some of the threads that they were introducing in the second issue, so it wasn't bad writing. It just, like, they took a step back from the action, which you have to in big events like this, especially this one, because it seems like there's a lot of moving parts. But issue 3 kind of is a little bit of a mixture of both. There's more exposition than action, but this issue does blend them pretty well. There's this B story with Steve Rogers that was teased a little bit in issue 2 that I am not fond of at all. I rolled my eyes pretty hard when every time they would kind of check in throughout this issue with that story. I was just like, come on. Let's move on. It sucks. But the plot is getting a little convoluted. And it's kind of, you get this with a lot of big events. There's a lot of moving parts in this story and in these big events. And this is probably the worst I've seen. Not well, worst is a bad word, but like it's probably it has the most moving parts I've seen in an event in a long time. And I don't know if it's the artwork or if the writing, but they just don't seem to juggle it very well. So I will say that when they're not doing a ton of action, these issues do kind of sag a little bit in quality because it just seems like they don't juggle it very well. I kind of wish they would be able to piece some of these stories together. It almost feels like you're watching like miniature episodes of a different story, and it's just like, oh yeah, it's a part of this bigger thing, but it just seems like they're not connected very well. The artwork is really cool. It kind of blows me away. I've just kind of soured a little bit on the storytelling aspect of it.
Yeah, I've been buying these and I have not dug into them yet. That you're actually the first person who I've heard speak negatively of them, so I am still looking forward to reading them, but that does hamper my expectations a little bit. Yeah. So
they're still good books. I've soured on the story a little bit just because, like I said, there's so many moving parts. It's kind of hard to keep up with them, and I don't think the story really juggles them very well.
Gotcha.
All right, so on to nerd news. What do you have this week?
Just a few kind of shitty stories. That's it.
All right.
And I wonder whenever I say that if people are like, oh, fuck, and they skip over nerd news. Either way, we'll get into it. This one I didn't see until like a day or two ago. It kind of slipped under my radar. But TJ Miller is leaving Silicon Valley after this season.
Yeah, I wonder what that's all about.
I guess, I mean, he's got some movie stuff coming up. Obviously, Deadpool 2 and Ready Player One. I wonder if he's just moving more towards that or what.
I don't know. I'm interested in seeing his new comedy special. I don't know if it's out already. I think it was done by HBO. But he's a comedian that I like in small doses.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. Watching, I want to say this a whole hour long special. But yeah, I mean, he seems like he's one of those guys that does a lot. So maybe that does kind of make sense. I wonder if there's something in the background that obviously we don't know about.
Yeah. I mean, there could be, because the more you think about it, like, people leave shows all the time for movie careers, but I can't imagine Silicon Valley is that big of a commitment. I talked about it when I talked about it last week, that it's only really a 5-hour season, so that's not too incredibly bad. And then, you know, Eric Bachman is TJ Miller in a way, so it's not like he has to get into character, you know? So I'm a little surprised. Maybe there is some drama behind the scenes there we don't know about. The Animaniacs is going to be rebooted, which makes sense. I think that it could do well, but I was just never that big of an Animaniacs fan when I was a kid.
I really loved it, and I honestly couldn't tell you why. It's like it's just one of those things that I remember liking quite a lot, but I don't even remember like I don't even understand like what it was. I just remember watching it all the time, but I never really paid a whole lot of attention to it. Obviously I didn't, but I remember liking it quite a lot. I remember liking Pinky and the Brain. I remember liking Animaniacs. Pinky and the Brain, I have a little bit more. Maybe I paid a little bit more attention to that than I did the Animaniacs, but I actually watched an episode. I mean, it wasn't recently. I mean, it's probably a year ago. It just happened to be on TV, and I sat down and I watched like probably 20 minutes of a 30-minute episode, and I was like, yeah, this is not bad. It's actually kind of funny. So I might check it out, but it probably slipped through the cracks because I watched so much.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Animaniacs every once in a while when I was a kid, but like you, I was way bigger into Pinky and the Brain. Yeah. Not that I was way into Pinky and the Brain. Just
I loved it.
Yeah, much more than Animaniacs for sure. So let's see. Sin City, Frank Miller's Sin City is coming to TV. There's no network necessarily, but it's being developed by Glenn Mazzara, who I might be mispronouncing, but he's worked on The Shield, The Walking Dead, and the Omen TV show that I don't think is on anymore. I can't imagine that it is. I haven't heard anything about it.
I didn't even know it was a TV show.
Yeah, I remember whenever they were promoting it, but I'd never heard much about it once it came out. So I don't know much about the Omen TV show, but he was involved with it, and he's also developing Sin City, which they're saying is going to follow the graphic novels a little bit closer than the movies did, which I have not read the graphic novels. I'd be interested in it, but I have not. The part that loses me a little bit is that the overseeing and the producing, and I would assume he's going to direct a little bit, is being done by Lynn Wiseman, who was involved with Sleepy Hollow and Lucifer on TV, but he also, I want to say, directed the Underworld movies.
Oh yeah, I don't think that's right.
You know, Lynn Wiseman.
I thought, who am I thinking of? Never mind. It doesn't matter. You might be right. You probably looked it up, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm right. So yeah,
as always,
he directed the Underworld movies. He directed Live Free or Die Hard, and then
awesome.
Yeah, and then he was involved. He didn't direct all of Underworld movies. I'll give you that. He just directed the first two, but
yeah. So suck it. I was right.
I know he was, or maybe is, married to Kate Beckinsale, so maybe they got divorced. And she's like, no, you're not directing these. I'm not doing it if he directs these. So, or maybe they're still together. I'm doing a lot of speculating here. A lot of speculating on stuff I don't know. But either way, his resume is kind of shit. So that kind of lowers my expectations a lot. But I think that it would be good for TV, especially if it is picked up by a more adult network like HBO or Showtime. So,
oh yeah, for sure. I think it's one of those stories that could easily be adapted to TV. Unfortunately, I was not a fan of the sequel, which I think we reviewed. I'm almost positive we did way back when we were still not super great at this podcasting thing. So
some would argue that we're still not super great.
Yeah, don't go check that out. But yeah, I did not really like it that much. I don't know. I think it could work because it does have those threads. It has a bunch of different things going on, and that usually those types of stories usually translate pretty well to TV. But I don't know. Maybe they kind of milked all they could get out of the sequel, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think that might be the case. And then this next one is just a good segue into our main topic. Wonder Woman 2 isn't necessarily in production yet or anything, but Patty Jenkins is locked in to direct it. I'm assuming via her contract that she had for the first one, there was probably a sequel option. And it is doing very well with critics. I don't know how it's doing with the box office, so...
I guess that they made $11 million last night. We're recording this on Friday night, and so a Thursday night showing. That's pretty good. I read somewhere I think it was tracking at like $95 million, and that's just domestic. That's not worldwide. So that is pretty good. I mean, it's all relative to the superhero genre.
So it's being so well received by critics. I think that's going to give it some legs. And I'd imagine it'd be successful and that they'll proceed with a second one. So it looks like Patty Jenkins would most likely be directing that. All
right, cool. So that, I mean, like you said, that kind of segues into our main topic, which changes from episode to episode. This episode, obviously, we're going to be reviewing Wonder Woman that just came out. Like you mentioned, it was directed by Patty Jenkins, who is most known, I think, for her TV work. She's done a lot of TV, but she also directed Monster. Wonder Woman was written by Alan Heinberg, who a lot similar to Patty Jenkins did most of his best work. Well, best is a relative term, but he's most known for his TV work with Party of Five and the OC. Oof. He directed, yeah. Well, I think he actually wrote most of the OC. Anyways, Wonder Woman tells the story of Diana before the events of Dawn of Justice as she leaves her mysterious island to help fight World War I. So, despite my feelings for the DC extended universe, I was actually kind of excited for this movie. She was probably the best part of Dawn of Justice, which isn't saying much. I mean, that's setting the bar pretty low, but I was really kind of curious to see if she could kind of carry her own movie, because she's not really, used a whole lot in Dawn of Justice, and I really liked her character in that movie. So I was curious to see if it was just because she was barely used and I didn't really know that much about her character and that's why I liked it, or if she was just such a strong character that she could carry her own movie.
Yeah, so this is a movie, so we go back and forth, and I'm kind of the DC guy, even though I'm not really. I'm just the everything guy. But that
might be the most humble thing you've ever said.
I love everything, and I like DC more than you, so I become the DC guy, and that's fine. That being said, the first trailer for this movie is like, okay, that looks fine, and I definitely my favorite part of Batman v Superman was her. Definitely agree with you there. All that being said, wasn't as excited for this movie as I could have been. Maybe it was all of my excitement was going to like Guardians or something like that. I just didn't have that much hype for it. But once the reviews started coming in this week and you started shit talking about the Rotten Tomatoes score, and it's like at a 94% now. It was at a 97% earlier this week. I started to get pretty excited going into it. So
for those that have forgotten, this is one of my movies, and I think it was one of my last movies that I picked.
No, it was bullshit because I was like, he'll never pick Wonder Woman and he'll never pick Justice League. And I put it off one pick because I knew I could get it. Yeah. And then you surprised me and you got it. And this movie could have tied things up a little bit more with me, but it's not looking very good. So
no, it's really not. And I still have my first two picks coming up later.
And you're talking a lot of shit for a man that's going to be dressed as Slave Leia in about a month.
Hey, I look good. I've lost like 30 pounds, so I look real good. But we discussed maybe making some prints. We probably should take those pictures soon.
That would be awkward. Let's not do that. Because it's just making prints would be me taking pictures of you in a Slave Leia costume and then having to go somewhere to have them printed off. So
that is totally fine with me.
So maybe let's not make me look super perverted at a Walgreens.
Yeah. All right. So we break down these reviews. The first little segment that we always talk about is broad strokes, which of course is just kind of a general overview of what we thought of the movie as a whole. And for me, when we review a movie, I've talked about this a lot, is I try to stay away from any kind of reviews or anything. I mean, I'll do my fair share of shit talking about the Rotten Tomatoes stuff, but I try to stay away from it. But it's kind of hard with these big blockbusters to avoid stuff like that because you see that on Facebook and Twitter and all this craziness. And so I did see something, I think it was on Twitter, that this was the best DC film since The Dark Knight, which, let's be honest, not really setting the bar all that high. I am a bigger fan of The Dark Knight Rises than I think most people are. I know that you like it as well, but I don't think that a lot of people give it the credit that it's due because it followed up The Dark Knight, which is like a perfect movie. But I will say that Wonder Woman is far and away the best DC extended universe film to date. Again, that's not setting the bar all that high as far as I'm concerned. I do like the fact that it brings levity to the extended universe. A lot of that, of course, is Chris Pratt and Gal Gadot.
Nope. Chris Pine and Gal.
What did I say? Did I say Pratt? I swear to God. When I was taking these notes, I had multiple times had to delete Chris Pratt. And I think I'm going to blame it on SNL because when Chris Pine, I almost tried to combine their names right there. Chris Pine hosted, he did his monologue, he did a musical number about how he's not that Chris.
Yeah.
But Gal Gadot's chemistry, and I was so worried that I was going to mispronounce her name.
Well, it turns out we've been mispronouncing her name for a long time.
What is it?
As you actually do pronounce the T. It's
really?
Gal Gadot. So we've been fucking that up for like a year.
Well, she's foreign. I assumed you didn't pronounce the last letter. Anyways, most of that levity comes from their chemistry. Chris Pine plays that John McClane action hero really, really well. Unfortunately, for a lot of the same reasons that I don't like the character of Superman, I don't really particularly like the character of Wonder Woman. She has that kind of the same flaws as a character to me. I just don't find her very interesting. I mean, she's a demigod, and in this movie, it's more just like she's just a full-on god in this movie, and there's definitely some big story problems with that that kind of prevented me from completely embracing this film.
Okay. I thought that it was really great with most things, but there were definitely parts of it that fell pretty flat for me. However, I think that the stuff that was good was so good that it elevated the movie for me past those things where I could kind of see past them. I thought that it was such a well done representation of the character, which is really important given how the representation of Superman and Batman fell flat with audiences in Man of Steel and then Batman v Superman. And obviously we talked about it in our review of that movie of how, Batman wasn't Batman, he killed. And so they totally nailed the character, which was fantastic. And it's just true to the heroine we know. And I was delighted to see her on the big screen, which was a long time coming.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So our next segment for the review is we just kind of dive into the story. The story is obviously the most important part of the movie, so we like to start off with that, and it also usually ends up being the longest of our discussion. So for me, the DC Extended Universe hasn't been very subtle in the past, and I really liked how this film was a little bit more subtle. It tied this film to the universe in a really, really subtle way. Past films, it's kind of been heavy-handed. This film is kind of like a 99% of a prequel, but the rest of that 1% is that the sequel. I do like that they tied it in with the picture. I thought that was kind of a cute way to tie it into the universe, but still was able to tell her story. Unfortunately, once that origin story starts, you have a lot of the same origin story superhero tropes at the very beginning. It was kind of tough to watch that, like her growing up, that training montage, like that got old really quickly because we've seen that in a million other superhero movies. And it got to the point where I knew the movie wasn't gonna take that next step until she left the island. And so it got to the point where she kept talking about maybe leaving, or she was going to try to help Chris Pine do his mission. And I was just kind of like, all right, let's go. I'm begging you to leave now because I'm kind of bored with this. So there was definitely some origin story tropes there. But once they got off the island, you're kind of rewarded for putting up with that, so to speak, because it's just fantastic. Once you get that, they get off the island and you get into the World War I setting, it's just really, really fantastic. I like that they have this old character that's been around for so long. I think it would be silly if they didn't do something like World War I. I mean, it didn't necessarily have to be World War I, but something like that. It would be almost like if they did Captain America: First Avenger being a direct sequel to Thor. Like, you have this character that's been around so long, you have an opportunity to do something a little bit different with your movies. And so I appreciated that they did that. Like, that would have been a really big miss opportunity if they hadn't. Also, I have a history degree, so the fact that it was based in this time period that I know quite a bit about because I had to take an entire semester on just world wars. So I thought that was pretty cool. They could have done maybe a better job of making it a little bit more about the World War I stuff wasn't the best, but that's not necessarily the movie that they were trying to make. They weren't necessarily trying to make a Saving Private Ryan type of movie. It was just kind of a cool backdrop. I think I'm probably going to upset some Wonder Woman fans with this because it is a big villain, I think, with her backstory, but I hated the villain. I really just, once you got to the third act in this film and they started kind of not pairing off, but kind of just squaring off, that just really, really felt flat for me, because even though we're not quite at the Guardians of the Galaxy type of, like with Ronan, where it's just like this really shitty one-off villain, I did appreciate that he did have some like importance within the character, her origin story. I didn't care for him at all. Like I really didn't think that it was a very well developed character, and I just didn't like it. I'm not big into her mythology because I'm not a fan of the character as a whole, so I really didn't give a shit. And so that's just my bias though towards the character. I just didn't really care too much about it. Like I said, most of that it has to do with the same reasons I don't really like Superman. Is she's a god, he's essentially a god. Why would you ever mess with them? And so the character just is really boring to me. So I was rolling my eyes a lot during the third act when they were squaring off against each other. And it also kind of has a lot to do with the kind of disaster porn, sort of just, I'm going to hit you and you're going to go flying, and I'm going to hit, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to hit you and you're going to do the same thing. And it just kind of gets boring. But I thought the World War I stuff was really cool. I thought that they fired on all cylinders with that stuff. But yeah, the third act was pretty weak for me.
So for me with the story, peaks and valleys, definitely. I don't know that our peaks and valleys line up completely. I loved the journey of Diana and where she goes emotionally through the movie, how she learns to be unapologetically heroic, and she knows it's her job to save the day because she has the power to do so. And I just thought that entire character arc for her was extremely well written, and that her arc over the movie was also incredibly important. I know it's been said a billion times, and it's not like it's a new thought or anything, but of course it's also incredibly important that this movie does feature the female hero. It's cool the way they did it, too. I really loved when she gets to England, and there's all this prejudice against women, and there's prejudice against her, but she just doesn't get it, and she doesn't understand it, because she wasn't taught those things. Obviously, she comes from an island of women, and it just rolls off her shoulders. She's not taken aback by it because she doesn't understand it. And I really like the way they did that, because they could have made her. I read an article where Patty Jenkins talked about not wanting to make her a ball buster.
Yeah,
and she's not that in this movie. She's just a hero, and I really like that. And as far as the negative goes, unlike you, I'm not. So before I get to my negative, I liked the stuff at the beginning. It didn't feel like it was treaded territory. I loved, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that fucking name of that island.
Mystery?
Pleasure Island, as it was once referred to, and as Chris Pine refers to it a couple times. I really liked the time there. I thought that the time with the Amazons was really cool, and of course, we'll get into performances, but there were some great performances on the island, and some cool action on the island that we'll get to as well, but I did enjoy our time there. The negative for me is definitely villain problems. So I'm torn because I wouldn't have wanted them to necessarily spend more time on the idea of Ares. I thought that they did it just enough, but the villainous characters in this movie are basically filler to me. You could have almost just done without them and just accepted that Diana's mission was to find and kill Ares, and then when Ares reveals himself, it's just, he's Ares. And the way they did in the movie, you could have done it without like the Dr. Poison stuff, and the general in the German army, who I don't know his name. I thought that Dr. Poison could have maybe been a cool cameo, but she carried no weight in the movie. And I'm surprised that this movie is actually doing so well on Rotten Tomatoes because of the Greek mythology stuff. I think that that's hard for some people to buy into.
And that was one of my main complaints with it. I don't care about that.
Yeah, I think it's harder for people. Like, I was talking to my wife afterwards to see what she thought of it. She's like, oh my God, I love the character, and I think that she kicks ass. But it lost me with the Greek mythology stuff. And I'm surprised that it hasn't lost more people, because that's a harder concept to grasp than, like, you know, Thor does it with aliens, or they say, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy is extraterrestrials and yada, yada, yada. So the Greek mythology stuff is a hard sell, and I think they did it the best they could, but this movie may have benefited better if they didn't go that route, even though it's very true to the comics. It was said that this movie would be the first movie that we kind of feel Jeff Johns' influence on the DC extended universe. And while obviously it's not written by him or anything, I could definitely feel some of his writing in there. I think, you know, I've read quite a bit of his work, and it's a lot of fun. And I think that him shepherding some of these DC movies is only going to help. I don't think he's going to have the influence Kevin Feige does over at Marvel.
Sure.
But if this is a indication of what's to come, I'm more excited than I was after the last year's movies.
All right, cool, man. So our next segment is performances, which with a movie like this, obviously, I think you have to kind of start with the star of it. When I heard that she was first cast as Wonder Woman, obviously this would be for Dawn of Justice. I had my doubts because I didn't really know the name. When I looked her up, she's primarily known at the time as a model, which makes sense because she's stunning. I mean, it's ridiculous. I guess she had been in a Fast and Furious movie, which obviously is not a great indication of your talent because those movies are garbage. But like I said in the intro, she was my favorite part of Dawn of Justice. And I was curious to see if she could carry her own film. And it's weird because to say this about a title character, but I don't think she necessarily was asked to carry this film, even though she is a title character. I really appreciated her kind of fish out of water type of performance, but she had Chris Pine to kind of bounce off of. Like he did, I think he carried a lot of the weight as far as the plot's concerned. I mean, it's his mission, even though she obviously is a big part of that. It's kind of him. He stole the notebook and they're kind of following his mission. She's kind of tagging along at first. I mean, she has her own agenda, of course, but it's kind of, he's the person that kind of sets the wheel in motion. And so, I thought it was kind of interesting the way they did it. Her character being that fish out of water really works if you have that other person that's kind of carrying the heavy weight as far as the plot's concerned. So I thought that was really cool. Like I said before, their chemistry together was just fantastic. I really liked the evolution of their relationship. It felt genuine. And I think that has obviously a lot to do with their talent as actors. So, I really appreciated their performances. I kind of am warming up to him as an actor. I've said this before. I didn't really think that he was all that good in dramatic roles. Like I think he did the Star Trek thing really well, but that's kind of that John McClane type of action hero.
Yeah.
But I thought that he did really well in Hell or High Water, and he's really good in this movie, even though it's more of a John McClane Star Trek type of role in this movie more than Hell or High Water. But yeah, I thought they were both fantastic. Robin Wright is a badass bitch. I love that she kind of plays these really strong ass female characters. I love her in House of Cards, and I loved her in this movie, even though she is in the beginning, which I didn't like, and she's not in this movie a lot. I really appreciated her performance. I think she does play that character really well. I think their crew was really great, except for they just weren't used all that well.
Yeah.
Well, not well, but they weren't used very much.
Yeah, I almost wonder how far into production they were whenever they decided to incorporate the picture thing into Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we got a picture of these fucking 4 people, so they got to be in the movie because they have to be in the picture. And I don't know how all that worked out, and I don't know how intricate that process was, but I thought that, you know, that picture played such a huge part in her backstory. I thought these characters would play a huge part, and they really don't.
No. They tried some character work with the sniper, and it just, I don't know. It was because it was not really well developed. I felt like he could have done a much better job with his performance.
Yeah.
But that was because it just, I don't know. It was already a 2.5 hour movie, essentially. So I don't know how much time they could have afforded with that. But I don't know. I just think that his performance could have been a little bit better if we cared a little bit more about the character.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I was slightly worried about Gal Gadot, whatever. Her acting didn't blow me away necessarily in Batman v Superman. You know, her big parts of that movie weren't necessarily acting. It was the action scenes against Doomsday.
Yeah.
And the only other thing that I've seen her in is Keeping Up with the Joneses, which is a pile of shit. I mean, she's not bad in it, but she's not really asked to do much. But she was incredibly charming in this movie.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
She plays this character really well and did a great job of embodying the heroine that Wonder Woman is. So I thought that she was fantastic, especially given that this was her first time asking. You mentioned that she's not asked to carry it alone, but this is definitely the biggest role she's had. So I thought that she did very well. I also agree with you that Chris Pine delivered a great performance, and I do like seeing him in roles outside of Star Trek. So Hell or High Water was high up on my list last year, and he was fine in this movie as well. Didn't really care for Elena Ananya. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right now. Surely not. But she played Dr. Poison, who I kind of bitched about a little bit in the story.
Yeah, but she's barely in it, though.
She doesn't have many lines. I thought the character looked cool in the trailer, and I thought she looked intimidating, and her character to me was far from intimidating. It was just kind of filler, and I didn't think she did a great job with it. And then I thought Danny Houston, who played that German general who I was talking about.
I can't see him without seeing him in 30 Days of Night.
Yeah, so the character's name is Ludendorff, but I thought he was pretty over the top and could have done without his character altogether. So
for sure.
But besides that, you mentioned Robin Wright being a badass. She was great. And I also really liked Connie Nielsen, who played her mother.
Yeah.
I thought that she did great as well.
Okay, so before we finish up this review, obviously we want to talk about the action. We saw some of the action in the trailer, obviously, and it being a DC film, I assume that even though I did really like the action in the trailer, I felt like I was going to be underwhelmed just because I am not a fan of this universe that they have. But it was just as cool as I thought it was going to be. The No Man's Land sequence was really, really cool. The battle on the beach was really cool because, like I said, I was kind of bored with that origin story. So for us to finally see them in action that wasn't just them training, I thought was really, really cool. Some of the flippy doos that they pull were too CGI for me. Like, I feel like you could have done that with harnesses or something like that and not made it too over the top as far as the CGI was concerned. I've already kind of talked a little bit about the third act being kind of disaster porn, and I didn't really like that much. But I did really appreciate how her powers kind of were gradually accelerated. Like, she didn't get off the island. It was immediately just this god. Like, I think they did a really good job of, as the movie was going along, she was kind of learning her limits. And I appreciated that because she would have been unstoppable at the beginning of the movie if she knew what she knew at the end of the movie. Like, it wouldn't have been a very interesting story at all because she would have dispatched some of these fights pretty easily. I don't know what they're going to do in the sequels or oncoming movies because, like Superman, she's unstoppable now. She's a god. So, I mean, who's even going to fight her? But I'm sure they'll find some way to remedy that. But yeah, I was really blown away. Other than, like I said, it's a little CGI and parts, and they also got in love with the slow-mo too much. I think they dipped their feet into that pool a little too much. But yeah, other than those two like small nitpicks, I did really, really enjoy the action quite a lot.
Yeah, the action was so fucking great. I loved the action in this movie so much. I thought the action on, I'm just going to call it Pleasure Island because I'm not going to be able to pronounce that. I thought that was amazing. The beach scene, like you said, whenever there's a moment, and I can't remember if it's Robin Wright or not, or if it's another Amazon that shoots the 3 arrows.
No, it's Robin Wright.
Oh my God, that scene, that moment was so badass. The one thing that I will say that I didn't like was the climax of the movie. It was really lackluster, and I'm, like you, getting very tired of third act superhero movies being just Smash Brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't the worst fight scene ever, and it wasn't the worst I've ever seen a movie do it. And there is like a character arc that kind of takes place through that fight scene where Diana realizes that where she has to go as a character and where she has to be as a person. But it's just, as soon as it started, I'm like, please don't get too smashy. Please don't get too smashy. And that's exactly what it was. And I think not only DC, but I think just superhero movies as a genre need to take kind of a step away from that. So a step back from that. We've seen those movies a lot over the last 10 years. And there needs to be something new that can be come up with for a third act of a superhero movie. It doesn't need to build up to two people hitting each other really hard. And I don't know what the answer is. I think of The Dark Knight, like the climax of that movie is not a fight scene. It's very I don't know what's the word. It's very intense. Like you're very much bought into the characters on the boats not dying and the hostages not dying. And I wish that superhero movies could kind of embrace that a little bit more than what they are right now. And hopefully we can see that in the future. But who knows? But so besides that third act, the action in this movie is fantastic.
For sure. So unless you have anything else, that's pretty much all I have for Wonder Woman. I was very pleasantly surprised by how much I liked it.
Yeah, I was as well. I'm very happy that it was good. Being, the person who roots for these DC movies, I'm very happy that it was a good movie.
And I am also happy that it's doing well with critics. So, star rating.
Oh, I'm a little torn because, like I said, there were some issues I did really have with it, but I enjoyed this movie quite a bit, so I am going to give it 4 stars.
Okay, well, that's weird because I think it sounded like to me that I enjoyed it a little bit more, and I think I'm going to go with 3.5.
Cool.
Obviously, that's out of 10. Or no, that's out of 5. I don't know why I said 10. Anyways, just in case you're new to the podcast, I thought I would...
If you're new to the podcast, also, it's very well noted we're not good at math. So.
Yes. For sure. God damn it, why did I say 10? That doesn't even make sense. We hate every movie we've ever... I hate Dawn of the Planet of the Apes because I only gave that 5 stars out of 10. Anyways.
Right. You ready for Nerd Favorite?
Yep. What is it this week?
So, obviously, Wonder Woman is kind of a big deal, it being first female-led superhero movie. So, I don't believe we've done anything like this before. I want to know who your favorite female badass is, of course, a fictional variety. I will go first, give you time to think. And, there's a lot of cool characters to choose from. Not enough, but still some really cool characters out there to pick from for a question like this. And I'm going to go with something that's maybe not too popular just yet. And to give you a hint, Pat, she is on my shirt right now. I'm going to go with Rey from Force Awakens. And that might be pretty trigger happy because we still have 2 more movies to figure out her true story arc. But from just the Force Awakens perspective, that movie still has not got old to me. Just her character arc in that movie is so great. And the parts of that movie, whenever I put that movie in, I'm basically watching just to get to the scene where the lightsaber flies to her and she grabs it, and then the lightsaber battle with Kylo Ren. Her arc in that movie, kind of similar to Wonder Woman, just finding her heroism is really great. And it's a movie that, like I said, I haven't got tired of. I watched it again this week. It's great. So I love Daisy Ridley. I think she's a great actress. Excited to see what she does in the future. And I'm definitely excited for Last Jedi and to see what comes after that.
So you mentioned your shirt. It's very distracting.
Yeah, you were smirking that whole time I went on my my thing around Rey, so I can't wait to hear this. We'll see what you got, comedian boy.
It looks like she's holding a dildo.
Oh, kind of.
Yeah, it's been very distracted this entire time. I've been wanting to bring it up, but I haven't had a chance.
It's her little stick thing.
Yeah, I know what it is, but it looks like she's holding a big dildo.
All right, well, I got to burn this shirt now.
But and nobody knows what we're talking about because they can only hear us and not see what I see. But I've been just looking at a big old dildo this whole time.
What is it? The test with the ink blots. I think that says something about you more than anything, right?
I'm always seeing dildos. All right. So, anyways, to answer your question, I mean it's obvious for me. I didn't even need the time to think about it. It's Ripley. It's always been Ripley. She's part of one of my favorite franchises. I want to say that she's the first really strong female character that I can remember even seeing in movies. It's the most obvious answer because I think it's the best answer. It's Ripley for sure. I thought you would go with Princess Leia, but that would be kind of my second choice.
See, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of why I didn't, because that's a debate that I don't want to have with you right now, and a debate I don't want to open myself up to with.
Yeah, I mean,
nerds.
You don't want to have a debate in a dildo shirt. That's fine.
What? I think that Princess Leia is an amazing character, and of course, but to me, I don't know. I like Rey better. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay, cool, man.
Cool.
All right, so that is it for episode 143 of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast. As always, we'd appreciate it if you follow us on Twitter and Instagram. They're both at the Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Google+. I realized that I've been doing the same intro for, year and a half, 2 years maybe, and I have never one time wrote down our website, thenerdspodcast.com. That has never been on my intro or my outro thing.
Really?
Not one
I feel
time.
like you say it, though.
I say it throughout the episode occasionally.
Yeah.
I try to sprinkle it in there. But I realized because just this past week I've been trying to blog a little bit more. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to pimp that one in my outro. I was like, oh, I'm sure I do that. I pimped the website anyways. And I was looking, I was like, nope. I definitely do not. So that's the nerdspodcast.com. Like I said, I'm trying to do a new weekly blog series. I'm going to try to keep it weekly, try to keep up with that, where I just kind of, it's more of a traditional blog where I'm just kind of not reviewing anything, just kind of shit talking about whatever I want to talk about. So this past week I did the most annoying people, I think, at the movie theaters. So I wrote about that. It was just kind of a fun little thing that I did. And so I'm hoping that I can keep up with that because I enjoyed writing that. Anyways, you could also vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. Comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Nerds You're Looking For. You can also check out our Twitch channel, which Tyler does a weekly stream at 9 p.m. Central on Monday. And I'll also be doing a weekly stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central. And maybe if I kind of get into a groove with it and I start liking Twitch streaming, I might add Saturdays as well. But that would be kind of a wait and see sort of thing. You can also subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use, we're on it. And you can also email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt.
we are the Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.